everybody, we're back, and I'm Linda Schulte with Schulte Realty, and I'm here with Dana from St. Lawrence Title, and we have a couple more questions for you and topics to cover today. So as the title company, a lot of people do want to know, like, what is it like? What's the process like? You receive a contract from the agents, like, hey, we're under contract. What does that process now look like for the buyer and the seller and the realtors?
So we do receive the contract. First, we back up a little bit, and we usually tell our listing agents, if you know that we're going to work with you on a closing, let us order our searches before you get the contract. That way, if there's anything on those searches that needs to be cleaned up, we can do it before we have a contract. Because once the contract comes in, everyone's excited, everything's been negotiated, and no one wants to have to go back and clean up any mess. So then we get the contract, and it's go time. We're going to reach out to buyers and sellers for information. Or first we're going to talk to the agent, of course. And then we're going to collect information so we can get payoffs for sellers, estoppels if there's an HOA, and reviewing all the information in the title commitment. So then we're going to distribute the title commitment, which is the piece of paper that tells us anything that's on title that needs to be addressed, or everything's okay. It'll kind of tell us both sides of that coin. And so we'll put that information out to all parties. We'll put that out to the agents and to the buyer and the seller, because it's required in the contract. So it's a step that everybody should watch for, because it's a requirement in the contract that the commitment goes out to the buyer. And it's on a timeline as well, which is in your contract. So we're moving all of that along. I like to say we have a couple of trains going at the same time. One is for the seller, one is for the buyer. Then the buyer, of course, has their lending train going at the same time, and all these trains are trying to get into the station at the same time. So, you know, it's a complex process on a tight timeline. So the buyer is going to really be focused on their lending process if they have a lender. If it's cash, obviously that makes everything a lot easier. We don't have that piece. So we'll be talking, you know, in conversations with the seller, conversations with the buyer, gathering as much information as possible, checking off a checklist, and getting everybody to the closing table.
Gotcha. So you mentioned some things about the buyer and the seller, and we have all these trains trying to get in. When is it important for, say, the buyer to contact the title company and the process? When should they do that?
So early, we will reach out. The first step is escrow deposit. So it usually, sometimes it goes out of order, sometimes it goes in order. Usually we will receive the contract, and then we'll send out the wiring instructions. And that's going to be a special step process, because we have to take fraud prevention steps. So we're going to give instructions to the buyer, follow these steps. They're going to call our office. Kind of old-fashioned in that way, that we've all gone back to these old-fashioned steps to enhance our fraud prevention. So the buyer will talk to us in the beginning as they process that escrow deposit. Then we might not talk to them for a little period. You know, they're going to be working mostly with their lender at that point. So that's the initial conversation with the buyer.
You mentioned the word fraud and fraud prevention with wires, and that's, I mean, we could probably spend 30 minutes on that as well. But you know, can you give everybody a top piece of advice to do to make sure that something doesn't happen when they go to wire their money into the title company? I heard you say old-fashioned way, we pick up the phone and talk. So could you touch on that a little bit?
Yes, we send out our wiring instructions with passwords. We also leave information out, so they have to call our office to verify. So that's embedded in the actual processing of the EMD. But some good advice is, if you're a real estate agent, don't pass any information back and forth with your buyers and sellers in email. What's the key factor, if you can always think of it from this point of view, the fraudster is trying to get personal information, especially email addresses, and they're imitating either the agent or the title agent, and then pretending to be who they are not to the buyer or the seller. So the more we have going back and forth in emails, the more openings they have to find out information, to know what's going on. So we try to streamline that process and have only the title agent and the buyer doing the communicating with each other. In the olden days, I know that agents used to often pass wiring instructions out themselves, but we've cut that out a few years back. So, telling your buyers and your sellers frequently, scare them to death about this fraud. I can tell you that I had an agent just a week ago who called me and said it wasn't with our company, but a $200,000 wire was fraudulently intercepted.
That's painful.
On a buyer behalf. So yeah, like you said, it's a lot to talk about on that topic, but simply put, keep the process as simple as possible and make a lot of just human phone calls. That's what you can do.
Right. And with our company at Schulte Realty, we never give anybody wiring instructions. So that is one thing that we've made as a very strong and strict rule with our company. And then the other piece is if they say, hey, by the way, we changed the wiring instructions, that's a red flag. You better call your real estate agent. So, make sure reaching out. They're going to be your quarterback through all of this as well. And one last thing I'm going to ask you about before we have to go to another break is, what about the seller, the listing agent and the seller? When should they get in contact with the title company in the process?
So the listing agent, we like to talk to the listing agent as early as possible. I have recommended a listing agent to put us on the checklist when you put a listing active, because we can order our searches and do our homework early, which we love to do because, again, you're avoiding delays, you're avoiding headaches. Once everything is negotiated with a buyer, you don't want them to get into an argument about who's going to take care of what. So listing agents talk to us as early and as often as possible. The seller, we will usually initiate that contact with the green light from the listing agent.
Right.
We always make sure that seller is prepared to hear from us as the title company because, we don't want to worry them because, again, it goes back to fraud. People get very nervous when too many people are reaching out to them. But we will talk to them early in the process as well to start gathering that information up front.
Okay, great. So thank you for so much information. I got a boatload more to ask you about. So great information. This is awesome. Good PSAs to everybody too. All right, so we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back with Dana from St. Lawrence. See you in a few.